All right. So today I have the pleasure of having Bram Kanstein join me on the show. Bram, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Of course, man. Thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So, as the name of the show implies, Bitcoin journey, for me, where I always love to get started with people on the show is to talk a bit about where they think is most relevant in the beginning of your Bitcoin journey. So that could even be before you necessarily discovered Bitcoin, maybe an event or something that was influential towards discovering Bitcoin, or really wherever you think is relevant to kind of get your Bitcoin journey started.
It's funny because I think I'm not really able to like pinpoint and like go back into my journey and be like, okay, then first I took this step and then I took that step and then I took that step. I think it's like a gradual thing. Like when your interest is triggered and you keep paying, let's say, attention to Bitcoin to whatever degree you are able to, time wise. I think many people just put together certain little pieces that they find along the way. And I think it also has to do a lot with, any preconceptions people have about money or finance or the economy or, of course, also their education. For example, like I do not have an economics or a finance background or education. I have worked in traditional finance. And I think like the economics and the finance part is actually like of Bitcoin, which I think explains the reason of existence of Bitcoin, is something that I've only really went down the rabbit hole in like the past 3 years or 4 years or something. And I think that did really solidify my conviction and understanding about what this is. So when I found Bitcoin, I really looked at it from like a technological angle, like, okay, the internet needs a currency. Now I see that any technological advancement is basically a compression of energy, right? So, first we had handwritten books, and when the printing press came, you could print more books with less energy, right? Same as going from horses to the steam engine, from talking to the phone. Eventually, the internet is basically a condensate, or like a compression of information, and basically also the decentralization of information. And understanding that really made me understand Bitcoin. If you connect that to decentralization of money, or the sharing of value over the internet, basically. And I think one of the things that I'm using lately as kind of like my anchor points in my thinking are like a lot of things in history already happened in the way that I think Bitcoin will kind of like proliferate. And for example, the compression of energy and democratization of, for example, information or access to a certain technology is something that has happened many, many times before. And I think Bitcoin perfectly aligns with those kind of processes, basically.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. And I think there's a lot of avenues I think you can approach Bitcoin from, right? An economic standpoint, a technological standpoint. There's a lot of different ways that you could approach it from. And I know, you have a pretty rich background in entrepreneurship and in technology in general, founding multiple different startups. So I think, approaching it from the technological perspective in your case, I think is very interesting, and probably something you're also quite adept at. And when you first, because I think with any new technology, there's a lot of, it's not just Bitcoin, but there's a lot of new technologies that come onto the market that there's always a period of deciding, okay, is this going to be something that will last, that will stick around, right?
Yeah.
For you, when you discovered Bitcoin, what was that like? Was it something where you were initially quite skeptical of its long-term value, or was it pretty quickly that you saw the impact that it could have?
That's a great question, because I think actually looking at it only from a technological viewpoint is flawed. I learned that along the way, but that is flawed. I did look at it that way when I discovered it, right? Like, so, like I just said, like if the internet needs a currency, then this should be it. Is basically I think what people should understand. But if you only look at it from that viewpoint, I think I don't know what the time was between when Bitcoin launched and Litecoin launched, but I remember that I actually did a Litecoin presentation at a big bank after a guy that did a Bitcoin presentation where I presented why Litecoin was better. And I don't remember my arguments anymore, but over time, I of course also found Ethereum, and I went down the whole ICO, NFT, all that stuff, rabbit hole, just to basically, I'd say, explore. Okay, so what are people building? Why is that? Decentralized supercomputer, blah blah. Like that is just in general my interest to kind of like see, like, yeah, what are people building on the internet? What are they spending their time on? And I think that's important, but eventually it's also a distraction because, like you said, there are many, many dimensions and subjects that come together in Bitcoin where technology is just one of them. Um, but the technology is part of the solution of Bitcoin, of what it is, and what we just touched upon in the beginning, right? Like the reason of existence. Why should something exist in the world? Is and I mean, I've seen that in the past 10 years in my kind of like startup life, like seen so many, thousands of products, tried out so many things, like if you can build anything, it doesn't mean you should. And so the most important thing is to figure out, if I have an idea, why should it exist in the world? What's the proof that it should exist in the world? And what are the elements that I can take from that information and put in my solution that actually match that need in the real world, basically? And I think that if you look at Bitcoin only from the technological angle, so without taking that into account, and you think like, oh, this is great, but it's slow. I'm going to build some crypto token coin that has like this and this amount transactions per second, etc., and I'm going to advertise it like that. Yeah, then you don't really understand yet why Bitcoin even exists, And I don't want to say that I wasn't there because I definitely wasn't there, but like that understanding, I think it takes time, and I think a prime example of not thinking should I build this, but or can I build this, but should I build this is, I think the launch of pump.fun, is showing that, yeah, if anyone can create a crypto coin and saturate the crypto coin market, then it's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy of no token, like none of those tokens have any reason of existence other than, I don't know, entertainment, casino, whatever, which is fine. It has a purpose, but I think that definitely shows that crypto is something different than Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you start. It's funny that you had a Litecoin presentation along with after someone who did a Bitcoin presentation, and I think a lot of people naturally, I think when you originally, even myself included, when you kind of get introduced to the crypto space, if you will, it's easy to see Bitcoin, and this argument gets thrown around a lot as well. As like, yeah, but maybe Bitcoin is the MySpace to the Facebook, right? It's the oldest one. Why is it still relevant? Why are not the other ones better? Why is XRP not better than Bitcoin, for example? And I think you need to really fundamentally understand the technological, but also the economic perspectives to really understand why Bitcoin is really in my opinion, the only valid cryptocurrency in terms of truly being decentralized, truly having, a future. And so what for you when you started to dig deeper into the technology, probably also the economic side of things, like what was for you? Because I think there's a lot of people that still are unsure of why Bitcoin is different from all the other ones, right? So what for you was what did you start to learn that made you realize that it was more Bitcoin and all the other stuff was more noise?
That's again a great question. I think it ties back in. So why I think Bitcoin is hard to grok is because you have to be able to conceptualize a lot of different things. Right? Like you can factually read about certain things, but you have to put them into a perspective or like some probabilistic scenario, and yeah, you have to conceptualize many different concepts in order to understand why it exists like it exists, and why it is different. And I think the main thing that comes up now is the rules not rulers part, and so if you agree that money in general is a technology to exchange value with each other, and that if you believe in true free market capitalism, so not the not the capitalism we know, but the free market capitalism, right? If you and I want to have a value exchange, you offer me something and then you ask 500 units of a currency for it, and I say, I want what you offer, but I want to pay 400, and we agree on the 450, and we shake each other's hands, right? Like that for me is free market capitalism. Like we should be able to do that in freedom, right? But if we use a tool to represent the value that we exchange from you to me, and I give you something in return, which is the reward in this exchange. If that reward is controlled and created by other people, just that concept, uh, it, if you understand that it works like that, you are basically at your kind of like red pill, blue pill type moment. And there's many of these different things, right? You're at a crossroads. You can be like, okay, that is good, or that sounds bad, and if it sounds good, you can probably find arguments of many economists, on the Keynesian side, and money should flow, and blah blah, like all these things. And if you think, that's strange, like I spend my finite time and energy creating value and trying to find other people that I can service with my product or my service, right? um, and I do all these things, and then when I find someone after spending my finite time and energy on the production of this product or service, then I get a reward that's influenced by someone else, and influenced in a way that it's programmatically losing its value. So if you think that's strange, and in my opinion it is strange, it's literally the worst trade that you can make in your life, right? You're trading your finite time and energy for a reward that other people can create without expending any time and energy. That's the dumbest trade that you can make. And so we're not even talking about Bitcoin yet, right? But it's more like, okay, if you understand that concept, and if you're looking at that concept, you're also forced, in my opinion, to have an opinion about it, right? Like, you can be like, okay, that's okay. I just keep on doing this. Fine. That's fine. You will suffer certain consequences, right? Because that reward that you're gathering, that basically that economic energy that you can spend at a later time in the future, is being devalued over time on purpose more than what is reported to you, right? So in due time, you will have you will see the consequences of that, right? So, and the most clear consequence is that you can buy less with the amount of units that you have gathered of this currency, basically. And so and then you have this other point, right? When you then experience that, you I think in general, when we have podcasts like this, like the whole goal, I think, is to invite people to think about this. Like, am I okay with that? Am I okay with the fact that there's a third party, which is just other people that are not better than you or me? They influence that reward that we use in our value exchanges. And if you get to a point where you say like, okay, I think that's strange. I think, yes, I am making a dumb trade. I shouldn't accept this. I think that is actually the first door that opens on your way to understanding, okay, why can Bitcoin be a solution for that? Why is Bitcoin a better reward for my finite time and energy that I use to be productive? And the rules versus ruler parts is, the fiat money as a reward is created by rulers, is created by and influenced by other people, again, no better than you or me. And that what Bitcoin is basically a very simple but profound computer protocol with a set of rules where the most important rule is there will only be this many units of this money. And then you have an issuance schedule and everything eventually derived from that.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that you can get value from using this system is if you adhere to these rules. And the whole point is that I know that that is the case for every actor in this monetary network. So that gives me, I'd say, the reassurance that although people can try to game this set of rules, they are incentivized per definition to follow the rules, because that's the only way that they can get value from this money system. And then what is value, right? The value is there won't be any debasement. There will never be more than slightly less than 21 million units. We can have this free market exchange of the value, right? If I send Bitcoin to you, it's out of my possession, literally and verifiably, and it came into your possession. I can transport it, and then all these characteristics that follow after. But I don't want to take it too far, but that's kind of like the difference. So I'd say that's kind of how my mind works. Like these two steps connected. Like one is, okay, what am I doing and what do I think of that? And then what is the core of the difference between the fiat money system and the Bitcoin money system is the rules versus rulers.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think in trying to explain that, it's also Bitcoin, it's a very difficult thing to try to, especially for people who may not, know much about Bitcoin. It's a very difficult thing to grasp, and I think that's why podcasts like yourselves and mine. What I think we're trying to do is we're trying to educate people more. We're trying to even build that discussion of, like you said, because I think a lot of people, especially people in developed parts of the world like Europe and the US, they oftentimes don't really question, why there are arbitrary third parties that can dictate, how much money gets printed, the interest rates, things like that. And it's only really through understanding not just Bitcoin from a technological perspective, which is already difficult because it's a pretty complicated topic, but also understanding Bitcoin from an economic perspective. I think that really puts everything together and allows you to understand, this is a really revolutionary technology. And I'm curious from your perspective, because there's a lot of great, people and thought leaders in this space who were maybe some of the more influential people for you on your journey, or what are maybe some books, or whether it be podcast books or just resources that were important for you to learn these things.
I think it's classic, but it's Jeff Booth. It's talking about, and it's interesting because I knew this before, but only he helped me to like kind of like put this together, right? So if you agree that the natural tendency of humans is to one, be lazy, but therefore our whole goal is to be more productive, right? Like that compression of energy that we talked about in the beginning, like that is our whole purpose. Not in a conscious way, I think, but I believe that is our purpose, right? So the fact that we are having this conversation with thousands of kilometers in between in real time, and we can share it with we are doing this all the time, and that never ends, right? Like the whole AI thing right now, like that just never ends. So if you believe that is what we're constantly doing, then a logical consequence of that should be that just like the information became more accessible through the internet, first the printing press and then the internet, right? And then, for example, if you think about the steam engine with the train and eventually the cars, like the whole democratization of travel, right? Going to other places, getting other information in those other places or other products in those other places, right? The whole consequence of becoming more productive and innovating is the increased accessibility to either that technology or what that technology brings, basically. And so you create more opportunity for more people. And I'd say that most people would agree that that's a good thing. Yeah. And so if you agree with that, then we get to the question why, for example, was a bread 20 cents or 50 cents, whatever, it's in the 60s, and it's now 3, 4, 5 euros or dollars, whatever your currency is. Shouldn't we have become more productive in the baking of bread? How is it possible that bread is more expensive now compared to 60 years ago? Same for the eggs, same for the apples, same for the car, same for the homes, right? Um, did it cost more energy to now, does it cost the chicken more energy to lay an egg? Or does it cost the tree more energy to create an apple? And the answer is obviously no, but I only got to that when I actually listened to a podcast. I don't know if you know the Aubrey Marcus podcast.
Yeah.
He had an episode with Nate Hagens, and they talked about energy. Nate Hagens also has like a short film on energy. They didn't even talk about Bitcoin, but Nate said, like, if you look around now, like also, if you look around in your room, or if you look outside, like literally everything you see costs energy to create or maintain. Yeah. And so, if you agree, again, if you agree with that, so matchsticks, they come from a tree, and the tree, needed energy from the sun, and it needed water to grow, and like all that energy is in there, and when you make matches of it, like all that little energy gets like put into all these matches, basically, right? And if you tie that back to what we just talked about the value exchange between people, we have a limited time on this earth, so therefore we also have limited energy. Our expended energy in our time is our productivity. Yeah. So everything that you do, you put energy in. And so again, if you make a product and you put your energy in there, and you use, certain fabrics, or whatever to create whatever you're creating, you're putting that energy in there. And when you are selling that to me, and I give you a reward that's basically an abstraction, or an abstraction of that energy, then it's pretty crazy that if that energy is condensed in this reward and it loses value on purpose, that is not a fair value exchange. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And so when I heard him talk about everything around you costs energy to create or maintain, then I realized, well, if you create or maintain something, you're also exchanging value, and you're using some sort of reward. If that reward is not a constant, basically always stays the same, as we say in Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin is now 1 Bitcoin, and in 50 years, it's also 1 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's when I kind of like realized that if you want a true, free, equal value exchange, you need a reward that is also absolutely scarce, like your time and energy. And I think this is, so it's a non-Bitcoin content that really made me realize that Bitcoin is the best reward for human productivity, because the human productivity is an absolute scarce something, commodity, basically, right? Like our individual commodity. That's when I really put that together. So that was a really big one for me. And another big one for me was Saifedean Ammous talking about high and low time preference. I think many people found something in that, but what I really got was the uncertainty of the future, right? So if you have limited time, like everyone has limited time, right? We could be dead tomorrow. Then your future is uncertain by definition.
Mm-hmm.
And so our goal, either conscious or unconscious, is to lower that uncertainty towards the future, right? We decide where we live, we decide what we study, we decide what we do as a job to make money, we decide who to have a relationship with, or who to have children with, or where to travel. Like all these things have risk, air quotes, risk attached to it, and they eventually, lower or heighten your uncertainty towards the future to all their respective degrees, basically. And if you agree that, again, the money is a tool to exchange value with each other, like that's what we're doing constantly with everything, not only with your own job or your venture, but, renting a house or buying a microphone or, what, like you're doing that constantly, right? So the money is a representation, again, of that time and energy. And so when you understand that, again, that reward is being devalued over time, there is this third party that is increasing your uncertainty towards the future of your individual life that you got, the 1 in 300 billion trillion, whatever the chances that you are you, right? And the fact that there are things in your life where you can have control over, or try to have control over, right? Like making these choices, which is already hard enough for anyone who's alive, right? That's the whole goal. That's the whole the experience of life. The fact that while you're doing that, there's other people that are basically devaluing the time that you already expended and got a reward for, and therefore increasing the uncertainty towards your future. Like once you really grasp that, I think it's quite a shocker, because then, like for me, it was I thought like, what the hell am I doing? Like why am I doing this? Why am I participating in a money system that is not designed to improve my individual life experience? Yeah. And again, I think that's a crossroads that you can be like, oh well, there's nothing I can do about it, or you can be like, what the fuck, and then just be like, okay, but okay, what do I do about that? Why does it even work like that? And then you kind of go down this rabbit hole of what is money, right? I think Robert Breedlove's show is great. That was also a big influence, but eventually the point that really got to me is, okay, either the reward that I get for exchanging my time and energy should be absolutely scarce, just as my time and energy, or I should, I can still earn fiat money as a reward, but then I have to save that in a totally different money system. And that for me is Bitcoin. And when I realized I could just move from one money system to another money system, that's when I basically went all in. Because then when I saw it like that, so Bitcoin is not an investment. Bitcoin is a superior reward for your time and energy and a superior savings technology. Yeah, you can just move. And that's the same as what Jeff Booth says. Like there is no future for Bitcoin. Like that is now. Like you can just move. Like you can do that. And again, if you look back in history, this has happened thousands of times. People always gravitate towards the better money.
Yeah.
So that is again happening, but the fiat fever dream is so strong that many people don't even realize that they are trapped in a money system that isn't designed to help their individual lives.
Yeah, that was very, very well explained. And I like too how, because I think what's interesting, especially about Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin is not a solution in search of a problem. There was clear problems that were identified in the system. And, obviously the whole identity behind Satoshi and everything is uncertain. But what we are sure of is Bitcoin was created intentionally with a purpose. And it's exactly like you said, when you read books like, I highly recommend also, The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, and, Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, and more. He also has some other books. But once you start to understand, and Jeff's analogy in The Price of Tomorrow is so good because it's so simple. It's really like, exactly like you said, we are becoming more and more technologically advanced as a society. We are becoming more and more productive as a society. So you would expect those productivity gains to also flow to individuals.
Yes.
So we don't have to work 40, 60, 80-hour weeks and barely get by. And instead, what we're doing is we're seeing the opposite, right? We're having to work harder to get less, to be able to afford less. And once you start to understand this concept, like you said, it's moving your money into Bitcoin is the only logical thing to
It's
do.
so rational, dude. It's rational, logical. It's all these things. It's all these things. But yeah, I tweeted last week like Bitcoin is a life raft, but only if you really want to save yourself. Like, and it is there. It's already there. Like you can do that. You can do that now. But it's about getting to that point. And I think what you said is correct. And what I forgot to add, yes. So Jeff Booth says, that that deflation is natural. If I become more productive, then the price of what I'm creating eventually goes down and it gets commoditized, right? Like the whole idea that uh, this is 100 or 1000x the computer that was in the Apollo something, right? Like that's the whole idea. Like this, first it was only used in rockets, and now we have it in our pocket. And so he says, so the prices should go down, right? But if you think about, okay, but the bread is going from 50 cents to 3, 4, 5 euros or dollars. And this is also well explained in Lynn Alden's book, Broken Money. And she has a really great video, Broken Money, on YouTube. That's 30 minutes. And there's actually a little animation in there of like this I think it's like a blob that's getting pushed between these two forces, like deflationary and the inflationary force. And so if you find it logical that the prices should go down, but the reality is that the prices went up, that's not because apples are more scarce or eggs or bread is more scarce. No, it's because the money that you use to price it in is worth less. So you need more units of that money to pay for the improved version of whatever we are talking about. And that makes absolutely no sense. Like you said, people work longer, harder, and they eventually have less. And again, like it's about like, do you want to see that or not? Like there's many calculations and examples of like, in the 1960s, a man that was a teacher could have a wife, 3 kids, a Cadillac, and a home, and all these things. And now the teachers cannot even live in the city where they teach. So are we going forward or are we going backwards? And before you can really contribute to perhaps a bigger picture in your society, your country, or whatever, like you have to first save yourself so you can actually start doing that. And I think in general the cognitive dissonance is really high amongst people. I mean, I had the same at a certain point until I realized like, okay, this is really happening. Like I don't like this message. I don't like this message either. Like I don't like the realization either that you live in a financial system that's not designed for your individual life. Like that is not a nice realization, but it is the truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, you either act on that or not.
Yeah, very well said. And I think that's why most people who also really understand Bitcoin, I've yet to meet a fully orange pill Bitcoiner that isn't kind of all or nothing, because once you understand fundamentally how Bitcoin works, and of course also the scarcity behind it, it's like I want to put all of my life force, all of the time and energy that I spend to earn money, I want to put that in here. But I think one thing that obviously people struggle with, myself included, is the balancing force of, living quote unquote on a Bitcoin standard, or putting most of your energy and time into Bitcoin, while living in a fiat world. And I think because one, there's 2 ways to view it. Like Bitcoin is volatile, but again, it's also volatile because we're measuring it in a currency that is constantly being devalued. And I'm curious from your perspective, like how do you manage those 2 things, right? Knowing that Bitcoin is a solution, but still having to live in a world that is still predominantly fiat driven.
That's hard because you are totally, and I am totally programmed in a fiat money way, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I approach Bitcoin as a very spiritual thing. Actually, I think once you understand that you are, people don't like this word. I don't like to use the word either, but Jeff Booth says paradigm, I say matrix, but it is a matrix. Yeah, whatever. I don't really care what people think. Yeah, you're living in a certain construct in a construct of a society where the money works, right? Until you understand that it doesn't, again, for your individual life and whatever however much you love your individual life and whatever you want to achieve. And so when you realize that, again, you have these choices, and in the movie The Matrix, you have this guy that knows he's living in the Matrix and that he can go out of the Matrix. The guy that rats out the whole group that says like, yeah, I want to eat the steak, although I know the steak is fake. That's the spiritual part. That's the easy cop out. That is the easy choices, hard life, because you're eating the steak, your short-term gain, but the long-term pain is knowing that it's fake. So you are not actually living the life experience that you've been given. And I'm very happy that I realized that. But I think because when you realize that and you start not adhering, and like you stop adhering to this construct anymore, literally by moving your money out of it, that brings you a lot. But that awareness also, so it brings you a lot of positive things, but that awareness also brings you a lot of challenges, because everything around you is constructed in this old paradigm. And so the first people that move on a paradigm shift are the crazy people that are shouting in the desert, and ignoring that and trusting yourself and being honest about if you did the work, either just factual information studying and challenging all the preconceptions, the beliefs, the patterns that you have, your way of acting and living, basically. Yeah, that's a continuous journey, I'd say, and that goes up and down. But for me, this has really been a deeply personal and spiritual journey that I think only Bitcoin could have brought me. And I'm actually, if you talk about the future like this, I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm very enthusiastic about the future. Like I truly believe that Bitcoin is hope for the future. Like it gives us something to move towards. And I honestly don't understand how people can live without Bitcoin, because it's pretty fucking dire. It is. If you like my podcast is focused on millennials, right? Like I'm mid-30. If I think about 20 years ago, and I sound like an old guy when I say that, like, but my country is really different than when I was 15, and that is undeniable. And again, not a nice thing to realize, but it is the reality. And I just in general think that is the wrong direction for us as humans to go in. So yeah, I hope that's an answer. I don't know. That's what I have to say on that.
That's a very good answer, and I think most people who kind of go through this journey, and that's why I think it's interesting to talk about people's journeys, is because Bitcoin on the surface can be seen as, money, as a way to increase your wealth, store your wealth, whatever you will. But it's also, like you said, it's a deeply spiritual journey, because for me too, it fundamentally, I think, changed also who I am, because once you start to understand Bitcoin, but because you're understanding Bitcoin, you're also understanding how a lot of other systems in society truly work. And that's why people, like Jeff Booth, like Saifedean, like Preston Pish with his podcast, like all the other great Bitcoiners like Andreas Antonopoulos, I could go on and on. It's so fundamental because you really start to understand, how the world works, and Bitcoin really stands out as hope, as you said. It's a way to have a bright future, to be positive about the future, and so I think that's why also, and I'd love to get into this as well. I'm curious from your perspective. So you discovered Bitcoin, and then you took the extra step to not just put your time and energy into Bitcoin, but also to work in Bitcoin. And you started the Bitcoin for Millennials podcast. So I'd love to hear a bit about the motivation to start that podcast and how that part of the journey has been so far.
Yeah, I'll touch on the spiritual part because I think that's part of it. Like to tie that back to what we're talking about, right? Like the self actualization or the spiritual journey. Like that is not the pitch for Bitcoin, but I talked about this yesterday with a friend. Like this is where you get, and if you think about like, okay, what is the purpose of people? Why do we want to be more productive, right? Like why do we want to create abundance? What would abundance actually bring us, right? And I feel, and I mean, I'm experiencing this in my life in a micro way. If you are able to have more time and space to think about, what is going on here? Like, why am I here? What is this meat suit? Who am I? What is the I? Like, what is the self? All these things. You can only do that when you have the space and time, right? And so many people are stuck in a financial system that keeps them going. Like you said, they're working more for less, and that is not stopping. That's literally the path dependence of this financial system. And many people don't have that space and time to actually do or start on that inward journey. And when I realized that, I was working on that, but I think Bitcoin for me has been the added, the accelerating factor in that journey, because it does give me the space and time to actually go on that journey. And I think in general, if we as humans can be more spiritual and enlighten ourselves, then we can actually have a way better experience of the temporary physical life that we've all been given. And I think that is probably one of the highest pursuits for anyone to attempt. And yeah, I think that is the main thing that I've realized, and that why I start another podcast is basically because I'm seeing my generational peers, some with a lot of money, some getting by, some working 80 hours a week and getting by, right? They have no clue why they're doing what they're doing. And even the people that, for example, spent a lot of time and energy to build businesses, and some got them acquired, and they have a lot of money, then they put all that money in the bank. And then when I ask like, hey, you spent all your time and energy, you built a company for 8 years, you have a multi-million-dollar or euro exit, and then you put all that reward in the bank, where if you want to take out all your wealth, some random person is going to pick up the phone and be like, what are you going to use this for? Like, if that doesn't trigger you, then yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know what will. And but I've had those conversations, and then I just realized nobody knows. Nobody is aware of the fact that they are not an actor, but a subject, again, in a financial system that's not designed to improve their individual lives. And that was my biggest, kind of motivation to start this. And it's also been really helpful in shaping my own thoughts. So that is I think that is the main thing I'm getting out of it, is that it just helps me think better, and I have nice conversations with interesting people, and then just put it out on the internet, and it reaches more people, which is a fascinating thing to
yeah. Yeah, well, I highly recommend my listeners also to check out your podcast. And I know we're running out of time here, so the last question that I usually try to ask my guests is, I think we have a lot of new people entering the space more and more, and we're only going to see adoption increase. What advice, given your experience, what advice would you have for any newcomers getting into the Bitcoin space?
Focus on the reason of existence. Why does Bitcoin exist? What is happening with the current financial system that you're part of? And I think the best probably the best video I've seen in the past 10 years was recently actually published. It's called "What's the Problem" by Joe Bryan, and it's basically a story. The video is 30 minutes, so if you search for "What's the Problem" on YouTube, or "What's the Problem Bitcoin," then you will find it. Spend 30 minutes watching that, and then you will understand why everything you see around you is broken, because the money that we're using is broken. And then that will hopefully open the door a little to Bitcoin. And so it's a 30-minute video. He doesn't even mention Bitcoin until the last minute. So I would invite everyone to check that out. And then something I'm going to build out, but it's live. It's startwithbitcoin.com. I curated 5 or 6 videos that I think are the best videos that anyone can watch. So that's where I would start.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Bram, and I will put all, including the link to your podcast and what we just mentioned here as well, in the show notes. But I really appreciate the time and insights you brought. I really thought it was a valuable conversation, and I think my listeners will think the same. So I appreciate that very much.
Likewise, man. Happy to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you.